sinners, and saints. Dust off those horns and halos. It's time for Alan After Dark.
I was about 10 years old, and at that age, I can just tell you that my family, we were really poor. We lived in a very old house that my dad and mom did a great job keeping it together, making it a place that could keep us warm. But it was way back at the very end of this old dirt road in the middle of the woods, and it felt very isolated. I guess the closest neighbor, which was my mom's brother, my uncle, was on the road about a mile away, maybe even a little bit more. So it really did feel like you were the only people on the face of the earth. My mom, as we were growing up, she had these usual habits, and I think you all know it seems like moms are the last ones to get to bed. At least that was the way it was in my family. And she would have this habit. Everybody else would be in bed, and she would go through the house, and she would go to the front door, and she would just double check it to make sure it was locked. And our front door had those like diagonal 3 square window frames. And her last thing she would do would be look out the window. All she could probably see would be across the front yard. There was a utility pole with a light on it, but beyond that was just thickets of woods. And at night, it was very dark other than that one little light on that utility pole. I was laying in bed, drifting off to sleep, and I knew that she was doing her final ritual for the night, and she suddenly yelled for my dad to hurry and come to the front door. Something had startled her. She was very afraid. She had seen something, and it made me sit up in bed, listening to her frantically calling for my father to come to the front door. I heard the rumble of my dad's footsteps as he ran to my mom. And I listened, and I heard her, not in the loudest tone, telling him what she had seen and insist that he look out the window. Her tone and the frantic conversation between them put me on edge. So I listened as, after a couple of minutes, they were walking back down the hallway to their bedroom, and my mom was saying, "I've never seen anything like that. It was just so strange, and it didn't make a sound, and it moved through the air." And I was like, what is she talking about? What is it that she could have seen? The next day at breakfast, I remember bringing up that I heard her yell for my dad, but she didn't want to talk about it. She did not want to say one more thing about whatever her experience was. So for some time, it seemed like she needed to think about, dwell on what she had seen, to take it in, to absorb whatever it was that was out there, but clearly it affected her in a way that felt like to me that it had permanently changed her. Days and nights went by, and everything seemed to return to normal. My mom, every night, continued her ritual. The last thing she would do would be look out the window of the front door, double check that it's locked, and then go to bed. There was never another frantic episode like that night again, but I never forgot how scary it was. I didn't even see what she had seen, but her fear was enough to traumatize me in a way. And me being the curious kid, I just desperately wanted to know what it was. What could have instilled such fear in her, so much so that she did not want to talk about it ever again. A couple of years later, we were watching ABC News, and they had a story about a UFO that had been witnessed by hundreds, if not thousands of people. My mom suddenly said, that reminds me of what I experienced that night some time ago. I could tell that my dad was really not wanting to talk about it either, but of course, me being the kid that I was, I just asked, "You saw a UFO?" And she said, "Honestly, I don't know what I saw. When I looked out the window that night, there was this object in the woods, some sort of metallic, reflecting, bright, silverish light. It seemed to be on the ground, and suddenly it lifted up and moved up out of the trees and was gone." She said, "I wasn't curious about it. It was just frightening, the way it moved, and it was so silent." Well, that just opened the Pandora's box for me, and I had a million questions. "What shape was it?" And she said, "Well, I couldn't tell you. It was in the woods. I was seeing the light filter through the trees, and it rose up out of the trees and was gone." And she thought it was maybe almost like a roundish shape, but she really couldn't be sure. I think she was so shocked and surprised when she looked out the window that she couldn't really comprehend exactly what she was seeing. She just knew that it was something that could fly, but it was like a shiny metallic silverish color that was giving off, well, she said light, but more like a glow. And I was asking things like, did it have windows? And did it have like landing gear and things like that? And she said, "Alan, I don't know. All I remember is that it was in the woods and it lifted up slowly and silently. And then when it got to the top of the trees, it was gone, like just out of sight." That incident has led me to a lifetime of interest in UAPs, unidentified aerial phenomenon, also known back in the good old days as UFOs, unidentified flying objects. I remember stumbling upon a sort of encyclopedia in the school library, and there was an incident, a UFO incident in Salem, Massachusetts, and there was a picture that had been taken of 4 glowing objects in the sky near some sort of utility, maybe an electricity facility. And I was consumed with reading that and trying to find out as much information as I could. Anything that was connected to UFOs, I wanted to read. That interest continues with me to this day. I guess I was in high school, and it was a Saturday. We were in Kmart. My mom was shopping, and I always had a habit of walking over to the books section of the store. Yeah, I'm a nerd. And I was just walking around in the paperback section because that's what I could afford at the time. I didn't have lots of money, so my allowance and any money made from doing chores and working, I usually would buy books and things. Looking over at one of the shelves, this paperback novel caught my eye, and the cover was sort of a golden yellow color, but there was an artist drawing of an alien. The sort of bulbous head and the dark black eyes. The book was called Communion, written by Whitley Strieber. Well, I had to have it. It just intrigued me. Just the cover intrigued me. So I had to have this book. Whitley Strieber is known, I think, more for his science fiction horror novels. And this book was on the nonfiction shelf, not fiction. And it was about his personal experience with what he deemed alien abduction. I rushed to the register, I paid for my book, and I cannot wait to get home to my room to start reading it. Whitley has a cabin in upstate New York that he and his family go to, especially during holiday seasons, especially around Christmas. And the book Communion really does evolve around the circumstances of a Christmas holiday in which he says he was taken by aliens, abducted, and experimented on in their ship. What got me is that I read the book in 2 nights and could not sleep. I tossed and turned. It terrified me. Parts of the book described things that happened to him that I actually had dreams about for myself. Now, I want to emphasize this. They were dreams, very graphic dreams. But these dreams that I had matched things that Whitley was describing in the book. I really was petrified. I was afraid to sleep. I was afraid to say anything because people would think I was crazy, even though I knew that what I was describing was just dreams. I really wanted to talk with someone who had read the book, but I didn't know of anybody who did. I really did feel in my fear almost as isolated as I felt when I was in the closet for being gay. The book was so compelling that I actually read it again, hoping to understand more of why I would have had such graphic dreams. Now, having said that, I'm going to tell you what the dreams were about because they were so graphic that I can still remember them even today. The first dream I'm going to tell you about, I'm sure a lot of you have had it as well. It was fairly a simple, straightforward dream, but it just felt so weird. I was lying in bed, and suddenly I'm pulled out of my room, and I'm literally flying in the sky. In this dream, I feel like I'm upright, almost like I'm in the air, but standing upright, hovering, moving forward, and I can see down to the ground, looking at the tops of the trees, just rows and rows of the pine and cedar trees that the area I lived is known for. I can just remember the illumination of light that allowed me to see the trees and the ground below me and that sense of movement. But after that, everything went black. It was a very short and simple dream, but I can still feel that movement. It felt so real, this feeling of being lifted up and pulled somewhere. I have no clue where or why, but it just felt so real. I think pretty much everyone has had a dream of flying at least once in their life. I've had multiple dreams of flying, but none of the others felt like the dream I just described. It was very unique in how it felt. The second dream was a lot more graphic, and actually I will call it a nightmare. It began with me waking up, looking straight up into nothing but bright light. I can't see anything. I just know that I'm on some sort of weird table with sort of like walls, like metallic dividing walls about 6 to 8 inches high on both sides that I can't see. If I turn to the left or right, I can't see beyond that dividing wall that's connected to the table that I'm laying on. I raise up and look to my left. I see this unique wall that has bizarre writing on it, writing that's of a language that I don't understand. Next to that is another table, kind of like the one that I'm on, and there are the standard alien creatures that you've seen in movies and everything else, the grays that are around this table. There is a man on the table, and they have all this unusual equipment attached to him, and they appear to be draining blood and fluids out of his body. I try to scream, and nothing will come out. Suddenly, I have the face of one of these entities looking down at me, pushing me down to lay down, those dark black eyes and a silver-colored skin. I see a sharp, like triangle reflecting in the corner of my right eye, and everything goes black. That nightmare haunts me to this day. I know it's just a dream. That is not a real experience. It is just a dream. But what if it wasn't? What if that really was happening? What if people really were being abducted by aliens? That thought should be terrifying, shouldn't it? But having told you this story and shared these two dreams, I want to offer you my opinion of what UFOs, UAPs might really be and what I think they are actually up to. Do y'all remember the 60 Minutes story that included Navy pilots Commander Dave Fravor and Lieutenant Commander Alex Dietrich? They were the ones who witnessed the weird, unusual objects flying over the Pacific Ocean back in 2004. Commander Fravor described the one object as like 40 feet long with rounded ends. He described it as a giant tic-tac, a 40-foot long white tic-tac that made maneuvers and moved at speeds that were beyond comprehension. They, in essence, confirmed that there are UAPs, UFOs, that exist that cannot be explained away as swamp gas or Venus or some sort of optical illusion. I think that the reason why military veterans receive more credit is because of the situation they are in. They have so much to lose in the situation with their careers that they are not about to lie about what they've seen. In fact, that's why I think a lot of people don't want to talk about UAPs and UFOs, because you are the subject of ridicule by most people. Even the mainstream media usually will mock people who talk about it. But then again, a lot of the times the stories that are being described do seem far-fetched. They seem to the point to be made up. But I do believe that if you just sit down and think about it, the universe is so broad and so vast, it's almost a mathematical certainty that there is life out there. And why can't that life be far more advanced with technology than we are? Aren't we considered a very young species, a very young planet that's just developing? And I keep thinking about just the technology part. You know, we have sent probes to Mars. We have satellites and telescopes that can search out farther into the universe than ever before. Is it so hard to believe more advanced civilizations would have the technology to send probes throughout the universe to seek out other life or to observe? And perhaps that's what all these UAPs are. They're simply probes with far more advanced technology than we could ever comprehend. They don't have to have living entities or beings on board. Why would they? Why would they need to have their own species included on these ships when the technology itself, if they're able to move a probe, a craft through billions of light years to find this little bitty blue dot, they have methods of communication that wouldn't warrant the risking of their species' lives unless they just want to come in person to do the observations. It seems to me that it's very much a likely possibility the objects that people are seeing are merely different probes from different worlds that are here just to collect data. I think that's a logical observation. I don't see why that would be considered controversial. Do you? But as I described, even in my mother's experience, to this day, if she will even talk about it, she will say, I don't know what it was. And I think that's the healthy way to look at it. We don't know what any of these things are. We just know that they're very capable of moving at speeds that are beyond our abilities. They can stop and go. They can make hard 90-degree turns in ways that just don't seem to be possible. But that's the benefit of being a much older civilization, correct? That they would have far more advanced technologies than we could ever comprehend. Does that really seem like a crazy possibility? I don't think so. So what about the people that say that they have been abducted and have been experimented on? Well, who am I to say yes or no? There could be civilizations that actually do send their version of soldiers and doctors and scientists who want to study human anatomy, our animals on this planet, the plants on this planet. If they're that far advanced, we ourselves are probably considered mere bugs, not worthy of existence. Would they really care about what we feel? Do they respect a version of the Constitution? What are their views and values? Do they matter when we are a lower form of life compared to them? Obviously, it's possible that people are being taken and experimented on. It just seems like a very unusual way to learn about us when you have this powerful technology that could do the assessments on its own. I just don't believe that we can understand what they're capable of. They have abilities that we can't even think of, that our imaginations can't even wrap around the possibilities. But then again, it's very possible. People that know about my mother's experience, one of the questions they ask is, why would aliens or an alien probe come to that area? I mean, it's so isolated and rural. It's just out in the country. The thing is, though, within about 10 miles of where we lived, there is a nuclear plant. And from my research and studies, it does seem like these UAPs tend to appear in and around areas where there are nuclear facilities. There's the story about the incident at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana in 1967, where a UFO had seemingly disabled 10 of our nuclear weapons. It created quite a panic, even though the military denied that the incident ever happened. I think that would explain the incident that my mother experienced, because we are so close to a nuclear facility that is producing nuclear energy. They may be observing our scientific advances, especially when it comes to nuclear power. But I do have to say, those who say they've been abducted and they've learned of this abduction through hypnosis, I really do have an issue with that. I do feel like there is a strong power of suggestion when it comes to hypnosis. Even though some of the most credible stories have come from people who have recalled the incidents through hypnosis. I have to say that. So you're probably thinking, well, what do you really believe? Are you just telling a story just to tell it? Or is there more here than you've told us? Well, the answer is, I have told the truth. I do believe that there is life out there. I do believe that people are seeing these objects in the air. I do believe my mother when she says she saw what she saw, because I can still remember the fear in her voice, the panic that she was feeling that night when she looked out that window and saw what she saw. There is a feeling of weakness, isn't there? Of being vulnerable, of not having any kind of control. And I believe that's why our government would want to cover up what they actually know about UAPs. I think there is a genuine fear that society would break down if they confirmed without a shadow of a doubt that alien life exists, that we're being visited by craft from other civilizations, other planets, and we are unable to do anything to stop them. I do think that that could cause problems. Although, when the Navy commander and lieutenant commander came out and told their story of what they saw on the Pacific Ocean with the 40-foot-long white Tic Tac UAP, we didn't even seem to blink an eye, did we? And I'll just tell you this too. If you think that the government, the CIA, FBI, the military aren't investigating UAPs, you'd be sadly mistaken. You know they are, because they want to figure out exactly what they are, and if they can somehow obtain this equipment and exploit it for our own benefit. That's one of the reasons why I believe that Roswell, the incident at Roswell, New Mexico, actually happened. I don't know that it was a quote unquote flying saucer, but I believe that it absolutely could have been a probe that crashed. I do believe that the military could have obtained the wreckage and reverse engineered what they recovered and have applied that knowledge and that technology in our military and in our space programs. When conspiracy theorists say that we really didn't go to the moon, and one of the arguments is because of the radiation belt around the Earth, the Van Allen belts. My argument is that we did go, and we used the technology that was engineered from the crash at Roswell and other places that we don't even know that they have obtained the equipment. To me, it all kind of falls into place where we would have recovered this equipment, this technology, and it led us in these directions to not only travel to the moon, but create stealth bombers and smartphones, things like that. I don't think that that's out of the ordinary or unusual. It seems like it could be a very logical thing to happen. I guess the next question would be, well, what do they want? If it's really true and they're sending probes or they're sending soldiers, scientists to do these experiments on people, what do they want? Well, it could be as simple as just observation. They just want to see what we're capable of. They're just interested in our species. Or it could be that they are looking to see if we are going to be a threat and are we worthy of existence. Let's face it, if they have the technology to travel billions of light years across the universe to find this planet, there's not much that they couldn't do to us. They could end us in a blink of an eye, most likely. So what should we do? Should we be panicking? Should we demand more information from our government? Or should we just accept it and move on? Well, in my opinion, I think we need to keep an eye on what's happening, but because we can't do much about it, the logical notion would be to accept it and move on. Thank you for joining me for this unusual episode of Alan After Dark. Remember, be careful what you wish for. You just might get it. We'll see you soon.